Sir Thomas Lawrence was born in 1780. So he's actually just a little bit. He was born a little bit before William Holbein, but he's sort of he's a contemporary, I would say, of William Holbein, and we the Holbein has always had a sort of interest in Lawrence because he was a local artist. He was somebody that was born and bred in the West Country. He was and lived in Devizes and then Bath. And really, he's one of the kind of Georgian successes of this period. So everybody has heard of Gainsborough. But Sir Thomas Lawrence himself, at that time and on his death, was incredibly famous and successful and would have been, you know, a household name. But unlike Gainsborough, he hasn't retained that. So people now, they may not be familiar with him, although at the time he was hugely successful. And I think the Holbein has really wanted to be part of that debate, talking about him and bringing his, you know, his work back to people that may not have heard of him, really, to rethink his legacy, I suppose. And so in 2016, the Holbein acquired this painting of Arthur Atherley, which you can see here, and it's actually an unfinished study, an oil study for a painting which was finished, and it was a large, full-scale figure of Arthur Atherley, which is now in Los Angeles. And we were hoping to borrow it because we were planning a large Thomas Lawrence show, but unfortunately, due to COVID and a variety of other factors, this exhibition is now not going to be live, but it's going to be online, and which means that actually we've been able to include many more of the paintings that we would have liked to include, like the painting from Los Angeles, that we wouldn't have been able to have actually brought to the Holbein. So that exhibition is going to go online, and it will be a virtual exhibition which will last about a year. So I will send you more information. If you get the Lawrence bug, you'll be able to see all that work. But we're focusing on this painting of Arthur Atherley today because it links with the themes that Ella wants to explore about coming of age. You see he's a young man, he's probably about 19, and Lawrence painted him just as he was leaving he was at Eton, so he was leaving Eton, about to go out into the world, and he actually had a career and became an MP. But this is him on that moment of sort of the end of childhood, the end of adolescence, as he's going to go out and become a public figure in the world. And there's something about the fact it's unfinished that adds to this sense, I think, of transition, somebody about to change, and you know, take on a whole lot of new ideas and the world, really. And it's interesting that when he painted this painting, Thomas Lawrence himself would have been about the same age as Atherley. So it's really interesting to think that he wasn't much older than him while they were doing this painting together, while he was sitting for him. And I think
yes,
the exhibition that that you're going to be able to see online is focusing on Lawrence as a young man. So from when he was very, very young, to when he left Bath. And he left Bath in the 90s, 1790s, and he went to London, and he started as a student at the Royal Academy of Art, and then very, very quickly established himself as a serious painter. And there was a huge kind of interest in him. The press were interested in him, and he had a lot by that time of very wealthy supporters and patrons. But whilst he was back in Bath and when he was in Devizes, he started to develop this story about himself with his dad. His father said, "My son's talents require no cultivation." He was like a child star, a prodigy. And his father owned a pub in Devizes, where people would stay as they travelled down from London, people like Sarah Siddons, who was a famous actress. And little Thomas would be brought out as this charming young child with long hair, who would draw and sketch these famous people that were travelling down, and there began to be this story about him. And when his father's pub failed, they moved to Bath, and Thomas was the one who brought in the money through his art to support his family, and then went on to huge fame, and became a painter for the royal family. So I think I'm in my mind today are all these thoughts about myself as a young person, and maybe what some of the things that I learned, some of the people that influenced me. Thomas Lawrence had mentors, he had patrons who helped him. And I'm thinking about some of the people that maybe helped me, some of the things that they said to me, their words of wisdom, and how that influenced and had an effect on my later life. So I've given you a sort of very quick potted history, some of the facts about Thomas Lawrence, and I'm now going to pass over to Ella, who's going to link some of those things with your activity today.
Fantastic. So hi there, everybody. Really good to see you all. Hiya. What the thing that particularly interested me about the exhibition is that kind of concept of coming of age, and that idea of kind of our identity and the formation of that identity, and how, you know, when we sort of come out of our teens and into our 20s, we have perhaps a bit of a more solid grasp of who we are, and, you know, what interests us, what's our pleasures, what's important to us, and all of that sort of thing. So as Louise said, Thomas Lawrence did quite a lot of paintings of people at that cusp of adolescence, the end of adolescence. There's the Arthur Atherley picture is an example of that, but he's got quite a number of pictures of people at that age. So I guess what I was thinking, in my own practice, I tend to kind of work around the theme of mental health particularly, and I kind of explore representing different kind of mental states that I've experienced when I've had sort of periods of mental distress in my life, and I kind of try to find a visual language to represent that. So in terms of when I was kind of doing a collage as an example, some of the themes that are important in terms of my own kind of coming of age story, I guess some of that has related in terms of ideas around mental health have been kind of important to me, I guess. You've all seen, I think, the example that I put on the activity sheet. So this is the example here. So it's got some words on it, and it's got a kind of portrait. So when you're thinking about creating your portrait, as you can see, I don't look very similar to it. So don't worry about trying to create a portrait that looks like you know, free yourself up and just think, you know, think a little bit more abstractly about kind of how you put together your portrait. And then in terms of the words, one of the words that you can see along the top is a quote that I found particularly sort of powerful, I guess, like when I was a bit younger, and when I was 16, I'd had this period of being unwell and stuff, and then I heard this quote about which the actual full quote is, "The wound is the place where the light enters you," and it's a quote by Rumi. And yeah, and I really like that concept of like, actually, although it's a wound, you know, these experiences you might have can be, you know, help form you and bring, you know, they can be kind of create a space where the light can enter you, and not necessarily just be a bad negative thing, but kind of, you know, so that some of those ideas were yeah, I came out of this quote for me and made me see my own kind of periods of distress in a different light, in a way. So, and then also this one also relates to mental health, the one at the bottom, which was another quote that said, so it was, the quote was something like it's not in relation to mental health, something about it's not indulgence, like self-care and looking after yourself. It's not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. And I really like that idea that actually, you know, spending time looking after yourself, that's not like, oh, you know, going for a massage or doing this or that. It's not, you know, it's not indulgence. Actually, that's what's going to keep you going and keep you well, and that's about self-preservation instead. So in terms of like how I've used these quotes in my image, I've tried to simplify them. So the quote at the top I've simplified to make it just easier, because obviously you don't want to have anything too wordy on your images, otherwise, you know, it might be hard to read, or it might kind of take over the image too much, the text. And then I've kind of simplified the quote about self-indulgence and preservation just by making that a bit more visual. Yeah, and then the other words were just some things from school. I can remember like teachers saying certain things in their reports that I found really lovely and wonderful to read, that have been important to me, I guess, in how I think of myself, maybe. Yeah, so in terms of what you guys think about, it could be it could be things said to you, it could be quotes that you've read that you think are really important. It could be, yeah, and you know, there's no kind of restrictions on the text you use in your images. But yeah, the idea, I guess, is to you know, try and think of something that's informed who you are in some way. Yeah, so yes, I'm just going to put that down for a second. So what I kind of suggest when you're making your images is to, what I think is easiest is to do kind of one thing at a time. So maybe work on doing your portrait first, and then and get all the bits together and lay them out however you want on your page, and then you can stick them down and then work on doing your text afterwards. But equally, there is no right or wrong way to do a collage. So if you want to do a bit of you know, having your words there and, you know, the features of the face, and then see how they can slot together, that's absolutely fine as well. One thing I did want to mention is this is an example as well. So what you could do is so here I've replaced his beard with a tree, leaves and stuff. So you can always like chop out an area of the face, and then I stuck his lips back onto the spot where they were meant to be on the face. Yeah, and the same goes with the lady here. So I've put this map on, and sometimes it looks quite effective when you let things overlap a bit, so the map goes beyond the edge of the face and into the hair. And I'm going to show you some other examples of where that happens, where it can be quite effective. Was that a question? Sorry. No. So the main kind of points that I want to make is it's good to sort of simplify your quotes. Yeah, so try and find a way to say them succinctly. You could just go for one bit of text, or you could do what I've done and incorporate lots of different bits of text, up to you. And what's really good as well is, because it takes quite a long time to find all the letters and stuff, what I would advise you to do is just get loads and loads of text, rip it all out of magazines and newspapers, so you've got loads and loads of lettering, and then create your text on your image. Then don't, like, what you'll find probably quite frustrating is if you're writing the word "the," looking for a T and then searching the magazines to look for an H and then an E, and that'll get like you'll be fed up by the end of that. Yeah, so just collect loads and loads of text first, and then you know, you'll have free reign with that to find the correct words. Yeah, so I think that explains the process. I'm not going to demonstrate how to do a collage because it is very simple in a way. But I'm going to show you a few images just to kind of explore this theme and approaches a bit more. Okay, so this is an image by Tracy Emin. So as you guys probably know, her work is really personal and quite raw, and really explores her own kind of psychology and her own feelings within the work. So she did quite a lot of monoprints which incorporate text. So this one says, "Get out from living inside of me." Yeah, so with her images, she, you know, just has a little bit of text, but it's really quite powerful text, and it's obviously very the words that she picks in her images are really important, you know, to her, I guess. This is the second one I wanted to show of hers. So "True love always wins." So they're, you know, words that kind of are particularly meaningful. So here's another one. So this one says, "You inspire me with your determination and I love you." So this, I think this was used as one of the Olympic posters, this one actually. And then she also had, she did a series of neon text. Here's an example of one. So this one says, let me just move this over. "It was just a kiss." Yeah, so they're very evocative, and, you know, we don't quite know whether these are words that were said to her or words that, you know, are in her, you know, her own head and her own thoughts. But yeah, they create all sorts of, they make you question all sorts of things, I think. Yeah, so I think she she's works really brilliantly at kind of picking words that are very powerful, I think. Another artist that I wanted to show you is Barbara Kruger's work. Yeah, so her work is all quite political, feminist work, and she often incorporates text together with her images, and they're very kind of bold. Often her color palette is black and white with red. So here, "Your body is a battleground." So she goes for using really bold text. Often, can you see, like, you know, the way they're kind of cut out almost. So this is quite, in terms of like using magazines and newspapers and cutting out of magazines and newspapers, you could quite easily create that sort of aesthetic in your images. Or you could even, with a knife, you could cut out little words, then put it on a color, and then chop that out. So this is another example. So "You are not yourself." And I think this picture particularly has that kind of cut out feel to it, hasn't it? Okay, so then I just want to have a little think about kind of how you create the portrait part of your images. Yeah. So what I want you to have a think about is scale within your images. So you might want, this is a piece by Hannah Hock, and you know, she really plays around with scale and perspective, and you get this kind of giant head and the small body. So you, with your images, you might want to do that. You might want to throw certain part features and stuff out so that they're particularly small or particularly large. She also has a sort of a kind of subdued color palette as well. So you might want to think with your images whether you have certain tones to your pieces. So you might want to go for using lots of similar colors, or you might want to go for like Barbara Kruger, where you go for real contrasty colors. So that's for you to decide. Then these three artists here, I'm just going to minimize myself. So these three artists all use foliage within their collages. And like this example at the end here with the mushrooms, they kind of grow organically out of the head. And the same goes with the other images as well. So yeah, you might want to, you know, you might want to have that as a theme where you go for using natural plants and that sort of thing, and let them kind of cascade and grow out of aspects of your images. This is an example by John Staysaker, and so he often creates quite kind of uncanny juxtapositions with just literally just two images that he sandwiches together. But there's often a kind of similarity between the two images he picks. So the images become, they sort of, although they're, you know, just stuck together, they kind of blur, the mind blurs those images together and creates a new figure almost. So you might want to, in your images, try and find different textures or different features that have got a sort of similarity about them. That might be an approach you take. Now this image is by someone called Anna Bu Kielwa, and this is just an example of how you can pick different different parts of your image that have got similar kind of textures. Yeah, so here we've got the texture of the landscape mimics the texture of the hair. You get those similar colors, you get the similar curves. So that can work quite effectively in your images if you pick go for similar textures, which is an example of this one, which is an artist called Jessie Treese. So again, we've got like the shapes that mimic each other, the nose, and then the mountains, and then we've got the textures of the snow on the hills with the texture of the hair. So yeah, that could also be something you might want to consider in your work. And then the final piece I wanted to show you is by an artist called Helia Raphael. And this is an example of repetition. Yeah, so she uses loads of, you know, noses, mouth, eyes, and I think that can be quite effective as well. So you don't have to limit yourself to two eyes, a nose, and a mouth, and a face. You could start repeating things, and that could look quite effective and create kind of slightly peculiar, surreal images that way. Then the other thing I wanted to say about this image is the mixture of black and white and color, which can be quite effective. And yeah, you see that in quite a lot of collage work where there'll be like a black and white image, but then splashes of color. And that could look quite effective as well. So yes, there's lots of different kind of things for you to think about, really. So just to kind of reiterate that, there's thinking about textures, there's thinking about kind of uncanny juxtapositions, there's scale, and there's repetition, and then there's organic forms that might grow out of parts of your pictures. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share there. So yeah, that's kind of yeah, an outline really of the activity. Has anyone got any questions that they wanted to ask in relation to it? I